This could be the first podcast episode ever recorded in a dressing gown. There is a reason for that. This episode is all about burnout, overwhelm, those times where you get to a point where you just can't anymore. In this episode, Andrew and I very honestly share where we're both at, how that's affecting us, the kind of things we've both done to try and recognize it, to recover from it, and we're sharing some of the tools that could help you. It's a conversation that acknowledges that everyone, neurodivergent or not, at some point feels overwhelmed and burnt out, but that if we are neurodivergent, these things do affect us differently, and how we recover from them is different as well. If this information is useful to you and you feel it's worth sharing with somebody in your life to help them understand you better, that's exactly why we've made this episode. And as ever, we'd really appreciate it if you would support this YouTube channel and podcast by liking, subscribing, commenting wherever you can, because that really does help. But for now, let's get into this very special episode about burnout. Well, hello, welcome back. It's Talk ADHD. So hopefully straight away the sound's better. And I'm mentioning that because I've been putting a lot of effort into trying to understand what was going on. So please do let us know after this episode. Is the sound quality better for you? Are you able to enjoy it wherever you watch or listen to this in a different way? So we'll start with that. And secondly, it now being the, 9th of December when we're recording this, Andrew and I have made the decision that this will be our last recorded episode of the year, and the episode itself is really going to go some way to explaining why we've made that decision so early on and what that means. But we will be back in the new year. We've just got to pencil in how, what, why, and what that looks like, but do not worry, we will return. So all that said, Andrew, as ever, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Matt.
So we've just scripted that. There's an interesting start, isn't it? Script asking how are you, but how many of you have been asked lately how are you and said something like Andrew just did? Yeah, I'm okay, I'm good. So Andrew, how are you really?
I'm really tired. Christmas is coming too fast. There's too much to do. Really exciting stuff going on. Yeah, whelmed, I think is the word.
Whelmed, yes, there's one. That should be in the Oxford English Dictionary of the Year, shouldn't it? I am fully whelmed. Yeah, you and I both, right? So that's important, right? It's important that I think we start this conversation with this honesty of you have an awful lot going on as a business owner, as a clinician, as a parent, as a podcast host, as in all the roles that you have. It's a lot. And at some point, I described it today to somebody else on our WhatsApp group. It's like being smacked round the head by a sack full of bricks with a big label on it that says, no more. We're doing no more. We are done. And truth be told, I'm in exactly the same place. And I'll put this in context. I don't think I've told you this yet. This is the way I knew something wasn't right. 2 weeks ago, Saturday, I had a few free hours and I did what I always do. It's not blowing a gale, funnily enough. I'm going to go out and try and play golf. That's my happy place. Green, it's a walk. I'm on my own. And I played 8 holes. And on the last hole, I found myself walking down the fairway, having hit one of the best tee shots I've ever hit in my life that I should have been celebrating in tears. Just sobbing my heart out, having an out loud conversation with myself going, it's okay to feel like shit. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay that you're not enjoying this. Just get home, get through it. And then got home, spoke to my wife and said, I'm done. I mean, I'm like done. I have nothing left done. Battery empty, exhausted, done, finished. And I think that's really vital to admit, because we both, in feeling like that, as everyone else does, has to then say, which means what? What does being completely and utterly whelmed actually mean to you? So let me ask you that then. Jokes aside, what does it mean to feel that? And once you recognised it, what could you do about it, if anything?
Okay, so yeah, it is that walk away from the 8th hole, isn't it? Just, I cannot do anymore. I have to stop. Sometimes it's difficult to find words. Sometimes you've just got this flood. And medication helps with this. ADHD meds certainly help. But there's this, even with medication, there's this flood of all the shoulds in your life, all the things that need to still be done. And it just, You can't get up. You just have to sit. And sometimes, when it gets as bad as it was for you the other day, sitting and staring at the wall is about as much as you can do. And even someone coming in and asking you if you want a drink is insulting to you. That's how it feels to me anyway. It's just, and I feel horrible. I don't like feeling that way. And I certainly don't like being that way with people that I care about. And what can you do about that? Well, the first thing you have to do is something along the lines of what we're just doing. And that is talk to someone about it, acknowledge it. It's unusual for two blokes just turned 50. We can say you've still just turned 50.
Yes.
To have that sort of a conversation and not just go, yeah, I'm fine, soldiering on and those sorts of things, because that's what we say culturally. That's what we say in English society. Stiff upper lip was to be framed. But I think mental health awareness has changed since the sort of post-Second World War era where, we've just got to soldier on and all of that. We started to be more accommodating of the idea that people have limits and people struggle at times and that's okay. But there's still this belief that we should soldier on and we should put on a brave face and all those cliches that come out. But carried alongside that, so that's across the population, that's carried alongside that with ADHD, you've got a life history of being told, just try harder and believe in yourself. If you can just push yourself that little bit more, you can do this, you can do these amazing things. And, in times of clarity, we can do amazing things and make connections that others don't see and all those wonderful things that come with ADHD. But there's a limit to what any human being can take. And I think the first thing that you must do is acknowledge it, and probably acknowledge it before you've hit that blinding shot and you're in tears, because even though things are going really well, you just can't anymore. It's too late by that point. I think this goes back to the episode we did on anger. There's a lot of that in this. Our resilience is worn away. We use the word burned out, don't we? And that probably need to talk about that today, because that comes with all of this baggage as well. And I think acknowledging it first is important, and working out your own plan once you've got to that point, but ideally being able to pace yourself so that it doesn't get to that point. And, I sit here a hypocrite saying that.
Forgive me for chuckling. It's only because I know you're right. You and I both. But everything you've just said is really true, right? I'll start at the end. Isn't it a fascinating truism? I think the older we get, maybe as soon as we're able to know what looking after someone else is, we can always give other people really good advice. We can look at somebody else who's struggling and hold them and give them the things they need to hear, knowing full well that we can't do any of it for ourselves. How many of us feel like unless someone else takes the reins just for a minute or says it's okay to stop, we can stop? So when you say I sit here a hypocrite, I imagine there are lots of people who've just listened to you in your position say that going, thank God he said that, because you're not alone, right? Me included. But it is that strange thing of, as you say, stiff upper lip, soldier on, don't show weakness. You talk about men talking about this, and we could say this about women. I've spoken to so many women, particularly moms, who feel I've just got to get to the end of term, get to the end of Christmas. I was thinking just before we logged on about all my pals who are teachers, when our kids were in school, how this time of year was always everyone just looked like just one more nativity, just one more crap session, just one more, and then it's done. Just for it's kind of like real mental in the trenches stuff a lot of the time, and that's the teachers, let alone how the kids are feeling and how their behaviour's changed. You mentioned reasonable adjustments there, and I'm talking about this so much at the moment in organisations, and it is the topic du jour, and rightly so. And yet having this conversation is really hammering home to me again that the way we describe what the problem is has got to start with, what does that mean to the person? If it starts with a label that somebody is going to prejudge based on what they think they know, what they've heard, what they've Googled, what ChatGPT has told them, right? We are going to run into problems time and time again. right? If I am feeling that I cannot cope and I'm overwhelmed, and that's the reason why at this point in time I can't clear my inbox, or I'm not getting those reports in, or I'm struggling to pay attention in meetings because I know that, to me, it doesn't matter. It's not important to say, well, you see, a feature of my ADHD is something called burnout, and that causes RSD. And by that time, you've lost people in panic mode going, oh my God, there's labels. I don't know what this means, but, right? What's more important is saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed at the moment. And what that's meaning is, I don't have the ability to process. I can't clear my inbox because I can't see the wood for the trees. When I try, it's causing me massive anxiety, and that anxiety makes me shut down even further. And I need some support to help me. That is a much better way for me of helping someone understand what it actually means, not the label. But because we're so hell-bent on the diagnosis, the label, the I'm part of the tribe in that way, right? We're actually confusing more people than we are bringing them into the conversation where they can help us. So the workplace adjustments thing is really vital. If you know you are prone to suffering with episodes of burnout and overwhelm, it's okay to flag that with your manager, whoever, and say, this is something that occurs to me or did occur in a previous job. This is what it means. This is what it looks like. And this is what can help. And again, is it, I just need to change the way my duties go throughout the day. I just need to change when I do things during the day, right? I need to come in 10 or 15 minutes later for a week just to give me that bit of extra decompression time. Whatever it may be, if we start from a point of what that means to you, I think we've got a better chance of somebody understanding what it means to them and how they can help us.
So, yeah, I think often the people who are holding back on saying that are also the people who the managers love, because there are also times where such people do amazing things. And
But this thing of labeling it as something, and we jokingly said we were whelmed at the start, right? This thing of labeling it as burnout is fascinating to me, because I know that if I talk to certain people in certain circles and say, you know, how are you? I'm a bit burnt out. It will get the audible eye rolls or the tuts and, yeah, whatever. Right. Yeah, we're all tired. We've all got a lot on. You know, it's just another label. Burnout's just a new label. It's just people who aren't trying hard enough. You just get it together. And if anything out of this conversation, I want people to go away feeling like they can say that they are burnt out or overwhelmed just as much as they can say they are happy or they're sad or they're excited or they're any other thing they're experiencing, because it is a real thing. It is a feeling that is different. And I think there's things that we could go down rabbit holes on. If you look online at a description of what is burnout, and then change that question to what is autistic burnout and what is ADHD burnout, you will get different answers. You will get different presentations of what it means. And that makes sense. Because as you and I have said, and you referenced the anger episode, we process things differently. We do not come at things mentally in the same direction as other people, which means for us, that feeling of burnout or overwhelm can feel incredibly different. It's not to say, by the way, worse. I don't want anyone who isn't neurodivergent that listens to this to go, oh, you've got it worse. No, different is the word, right? It's about saying we will experience it different. We will need to do different things to recover from it than somebody who doesn't struggle with ADHD or autistic burnout may. It doesn't make it any different, any harder. But it is to acknowledge that it's okay to say these things. It's okay to start talking about what does it mean. And I mean, I'm sitting here thinking after that eighth hole breakdown, and I was so grateful that it was an empty day and no one else was in the clubhouse as I walked down there. What did I do? Well, quite honestly, last week I gave myself a day of as close to nothing as I could, no peopling, tried to not be on social media, which is my nemesis at times, as much as I could. But you know what? I still had a full week of work. I still had to go to London for a day on Monday and deal with all of the travel and the overwhelm and everything that brings for me. And the fact that I was already feeling, you mentioned all the could have, would have, should haves. And I went into that training session thinking this won't be good enough. I know I'm not going to give you my best because I'm not there. I went in feeling that, and I'm still dreading the feedback. So it's spiked the RSD as well. It spiked that emotional dysregulation. I had a week of some of the most deep and intense mentoring calls I've had for a long time. Not all difficult in a negative way, just challenging for me. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I feel a responsibility to go, I've got to give you my best here, and I'm not sure I can. And, you know, it must be the same for you and other clinicians in that space. When you're feeling like that, you know, knowing people are there relying on you, coming to you for a very specific reason, adds its own challenges. So the truth is, I got to the end of this weekend, and I was properly done in. You know, I don't think anyone in my house would have said otherwise. I've tried to do all the things that are good for me. I've been climbing. I've tried to stay connected. But there comes a point where you just go, enough, right? And it's that appreciation and acceptance that that's okay, and that the right thing to do perhaps is not keep soldiering on. Because if we keep going on, when we recognize it, like you said, the net result, the further we go, is that the longer we're likely to be out of action, the higher the consequences. Now, I don't think I've shared these with you. I found some statistics recently about days taken off sick in the UK, 2022, 2023. Burnout, interestingly, comes up in the stats. Right. So it says around 36.5 million individual days were taken off sick, 2022, 2023. The figure I remember, 17.1 of them were taken off and were reported as stress, anxiety, or depression. That's what that person presented as to the GP at that point. Based on all of the surveys that have been done throughout the year, through ONS, through things like, you know, charities, neurodivergent organizations, collating all that data, it's estimated that around 8.5 million of those days were people like us, neurodivergent in one way or another, who were burnt out. And what they were going to the doctor and presenting with was being whelmed, being burnt out. And that burnout was a result of a lot of different factors when drilled into. But 8.5 million days? And I'm certain, I am convinced, Andrew, that if we spoke about this more, if we were more open about this, a large percentage of those could have been avoided. If somebody had felt several weeks or months earlier that it was okay to say, I'm getting to the point here where I know something's not right. And they didn't feel like they just had to plow on and keep doing until the point they broke. And it's figures like that that I think are the stark reality of a conversation like this. Because anyone can roll their eyes loudly and go, oh, yeah, burnout, oh, ADHD. But the facts of the matter are there are very real economic, social consequences to this conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important to have it, right?
Yeah, it's a conversation that needs to be had. I made reference to wartime vim and vigor and moving away from that. We're moving away from it. I don't think as a society we've got it right yet. Those figures really hammer home the message that we haven't got it right yet. The fact that it is odd that two 50-year-old men have this conversation about, no, you're not fine, it shouldn't be odd. It should be perfectly normal. And it shouldn't get to the point of tears on the golf course or just wiped out in bed. But it does, and it does for lots of people, not just you or I. I think it's the majority of people. And how are we looking out for each other if we're doing that to each other and putting on that expectation? Lots of the episodes we've done this season have been about communicating the ability to meet expectations and letting people know where you're at. It's a really important skill to have, and as a society we need to get better at doing that, communicating that and saying, actually today I can't do this, I can do this. Sometimes I'll give myself a light duties day and I'll move files around in a filing system, or I'll, just, do some tedious tidying up, because I know if I do anything more than that, I'll make a mess. And I work with people's lives. I can't be making a mess. And yes, there are days where I just say, I can't see patients today. And over the past year, that's got more acceptable to me. As we've talked and I've sort of reflected on my practice and where I am in my understanding of myself. I can remember one day, sometime within the last 6 months, I just stopped altogether and had one of those days like you described, off. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with that, because how hard is it to just not do anything? With ADHD, that is a challenge. That's hard work to not do anything. Even when you're goosed, even when you're flat out, you can't. There's still that, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And the guilt that comes with, I should. And the lifetime's experience of, well, if I can stand, then I probably should still be fighting. And no, actually, rest and recuperation's really important.
It's really interesting, though, that, you go back to that point of should, could, right? I find it both irritating, fascinating, and debilitating all at the same time, that the more exhausted I am, the less capable I feel, the more those thoughts are the first in my head. All of the guilt and the shame and the who I'm letting down and what I'm not good enough at are the ones that are literally, bright colours, full volume in my head, and shutting those off and pushing them away and saying, no, I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to feel that. I'm not going to start from this point is so difficult. It is so challenging to say, no, wait a minute. This is monkey brain again. This is, making myself feel bad, right? I choose not to do that is difficult. And like you say, talking about it is interesting, and I'm sure we'll touch on what this will mean at another point. But there are lots of things happening in the press, lots of conversations about support for people with ADHD and, on the bigger page, neurodivergent conditions. We've got task forces being set up and we've got all sorts of things being looked at. And I am a firm believer, as are you, that a lot of what's missing is that early conversation to educate people that things like this are real, that things like this actually exist, that things like this are really, really difficult, and to learn how to recognize them, how to cope with them, and how to build skills when we can see them coming, and how to be able to have the confidence to talk about them with somebody else without all of that negativity. But I think what I see an awful lot, I see it on our group, I see it in other conversations, is for many people, and I know some people will say, well, it's because I masked all my life, and that's a separate conversation. But for a lot of people, the first time that they get really smacked round the head with a bag of bricks is post-recognition or diagnosis, when they've kind of started to accept that their brain might be wired differently, and then they go, wow, this is bad. I mean, I've never struggled like this before. That to me is a fascinating conversation, because I had a very heated debate with somebody not long ago about this. Why is it that once somebody's had a diagnosis, they can't cope as well as they used to? Who says they were actually coping, you or them? Who says that they weren't quietly falling apart at the seams for decades? You or them? No, what you saw was someone doing their best job of keeping it together so that there were no consequences. That's not the same thing as they've got worse now. That's their cup has completely run over, and now they've got the information to say, I don't have to do that. If you can't go with that, that's on you. But I don't have to do that. And I think that's what's an interesting part of this conversation about burnout.
For that person that didn't used to seem like they were burned out, socially they didn't. They put on a show. They were the person who held back the tears on the golf course and went home and then cried doubly so because they couldn't let that go back on the golf course. That's where it's at. So it's the diagnosis moves you away from this idea that you're wrong, that actually there's a different way of understanding this, and it's okay to not be able to do certain things. I tell most children I diagnose, I'll never win a gold Olympic medal. It doesn't mean I'm no good just because I can't run 100 meters in under 10 seconds.
Mm.
But we're all pushing for that perfection because that's what you strive to do before you're diagnosed. You're aiming for that. You do your best you can because that surely's got to be good enough. And it never is. But post-diagnosis, good enough can be good enough and be genuinely good enough. Not good enough to just hide it. Just be damn good that I did that today. And it does to be groundbreaking, monumental things to be good enough for you on that day. Different days, we have different abilities. We're not consistently doing brilliant things. Nobody is. And anybody who says they are is deluding themselves as much as we used to before we were diagnosed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I genuinely think that's such an important piece. Go back and listen to what Andrew just said, because you know people doing that and saying those things. You may have been that person yourself, right? But there comes a point where we have to go, wait a minute. That's not reality. That's not sustainable. That's not natural. I think I mentioned children in school earlier on. There's an important piece for me. I can look at my own kids here. I don't know about you, but I can now really look back and see from a very early age when they were showing signs of burnout, when they were showing signs of they'd got to this point, but they were kids. They didn't have words for this. They didn't have the tools to express it. Right. And I am sure there will be parents or aunts and uncles, anyone with children in their life listening, teachers even, who will recognize when that child's behavior starts to change and stay changed. You know, we can take that child that we know has got a diagnosis and know what they're like most of the term. But when you start to see their ability to do fundamental sort of, if you like, executive function things, lessen consistently when their behavior changes, when they're more emotional, when they're less social, when everything is a bit more turned up, I think it's really important for every adult supporting that child to start asking questions about, okay, what might that be information on? What does that tell us? And what can we do? How do we support a child that doesn't have the words to say, yeah, I'm a bit whelmed here, I'm a bit burnt out? Because, you know, I don't know many 6 or 7 or 8 year olds that know these words, that understand them. And I think that's a very important piece of this, is understanding and to recognize it in the people we're supporting and not being afraid to start the conversation. You know, like we started this podcast, we can ask anyone, are you okay? And get that platitude, right? But we need to be able to have conversations that say, it feels like things aren't okay. Is there anything you need to talk about? You don't seem very happy at the moment. You've gone off your football or your ice skating or whatever your hobbies are. What's happened? I think that's such an important thing because it teaches children early that it's okay to say, I'm not good, I'm not happy. I don't know what's going on, but something's not the same. And arming our children as early as we can with the ability to do that in words that are right for them is vital to teaching them how to cope as they go into adulthood, as they go to college or university or into the world of work. It's vital that they learn those skills to recognize and go, yeah, hold on, something's not right here. And who do I talk to? Like we've said. But I think, as you've said before, we are sadly still a very long way from that.
Yeah, we've still got children who are being criticised for their attendance at school. I've got to go in. I'm not going to get my 100%, or I'm going to tip below whatever the threshold is for the school. And the school are teaching children, you've just got to keep going, stiff upper lip, and keep going. And a lot of neurodivergent children who are saying, I can't go to school today, haven't got the language to say why, but it is often, in my experience, this. Therefore, the school aren't accommodating them as well as they could, and certainly not accommodating their needs. School accommodations only have to be good enough. No one can give that perfect accommodation. Same in the workplace. There comes a point where, if things aren't right, then yes, you can push yourself to a certain degree. And I think you should. I'm not saying that people shouldn't ever, oh, I don't feel like going into work today, so I won't because I'm burned out. They're being dramatic about it. But at the, you have to be honest with yourself. And I think the signs are there. The signs that you've described in children, the signs that I've talked about, that struggling word finding, that struggling processing information more than you normally would, those ideas of all the things you should do buzzing around in your head more than they normally do. That's you're not managing as well as you usually do. That's your brain telling you you're not processing. And whether you're a child saying, I can't cope with school today, or an adult saying, I can't go to work today, we need to get to the point where we can say, that's okay. I've pushed myself too far. I've given 110% for too long. I need to give 90 for a bit to pay back.
Yeah, to restore.
A resilience overdraft. So yes, I'm not saying you should never give 110%. And strive and push, because that's what makes the human spirit great. But at the same time, those people who do that don't do that consistently. They do stop. They do take a step back.
Yeah. And I think what's important in that is knowing what your support network looks like, or creating support networks for each other, whether it's parents and children, adults and children, 250-year-old blokes, it doesn't matter. Finding your tribe, that thing again that I've said so often, of just people that will believe you, who aren't going to challenge you or criticize you or disbelieve you when you say, I feel this, who are actually going to go, okay, what does that mean? Right? I think it's so important that we know what our tribe is, or who our tribe is, and where they are. And we have the tools to communicate with them. Right, we have the tools to say, look, I'm not talking today, it's WhatsApp or nothing. It's, that's the way it is, email or nothing, whatever it may be, is really, really important that we do that.
It's like they set the bar too high for themselves. I say them like I'm not one. Really, flashes of brilliance that, it's not 110%, it's 200%. Wow. You're really knocking them out of the park today, whatever it is that you're doing. And we teach people inadvertently that we're able to do that. And they think that is something that we can consistently do. And that overperformance is as pathological as the burnout.
Yeah.
You can't have that level of consistency. However, a good manager can manage a team where there's someone doing that, and then they kick back to 50%, but the people who are sort of steady away and just giving 95% every day, they come in and take up the slack and make sure that the email boxes are flowing and the jobs are getting done. So there's something for managers to think about there in how they manage these brilliant performers who then sometimes crash, because ideally it would be nice to even that out a bit. But I know there are times where I just see it all makes sense to me. It's not at the moment. I'm too tired for that at the moment. But there are times where I'm feeling more fresh, where I'm thinking really clearly, and I just see it all, and it makes lots of sense, and I can do some brilliant work at those times. That's not happening for me at the moment. I'm managing it enough so that it's safe for me to work, and I'm getting the basics done, and also taking breaks.
Yeah, absolutely. I just listened to that, and I was trying to reflect on the pattern, if you like, for me. And if I think about it, overwhelm is going to sound a really stupidly obvious statement, but go with me here. These periods of burnout and massive overwhelm are always, for me, preceded by quite intensive periods of that 200% mega productivity, absolute brilliance, being more productive than I've ever been in my life, feeling like this stuff's easy, right? It's always just after that this happens. It's always that I am the last to notice, or the last to realize that I am not built to sustain that. I am, as a person, not able to keep that up day in, day out. And what's fascinating is I can look back on the times where I've had people tell me that they can see this. You included, my wife, my kids, friends who said, is everything all right? I know you say it is, but you're doing a lot. Yeah, I'm fine. It's almost like a mania until it's not. Now, I don't know whether that's inherently a me thing or inherently lots of people think. But it certainly makes me think about, from a manager's point of view, if you've got that person that's gone from really, really good to, oh my God, this is epic for a while, perhaps that's the time to start paying a bit more attention and going, look, I really appreciate all the work and all the effort. However, it's okay to dial this down. It's okay to pass a bit over. I wonder whether that's a skill. And again, taking that away from an ADHD or away from an autism and into a person thing, I wonder whether that's just as important to teach people as well.
I think you and I both know, if we're being honest about this, that those brilliantly productive times, they are self-sustaining, they're self-fueling. You have to do it then. I don't know whether you feel that way, but when I get one of those, I have to go with it. And yes, then you sort of you get carried away on the tide of that. And I think there's something about being aware of that tide and being honest with yourself that you are overclocking yourself, pushing yourself to get this brilliance done. Because the last thing we want to do is cramp the style of that too much. We don't want to get in the way of that, because that's where the brilliance is. But at the same time, learning to manage that is really very important. Learning to understand that that's what it is, and that it is a lot more adrenaline fueled, and that it does come at a high price. It's a difference between driving at 60 and 90, isn't it? You burn a lot more fuel driving at 90 than you do at 60, but you get there quicker, so long as you don't get pulled over for speeding.
Right now, I'm going to say something now, and this is where I lose half our audience when they realise what I had to do for a living before the consultancy took off, because you'll all hate me. Using that speed analogy is fascinating to me now. For about a year and a half, I was a speed awareness course trainer because didn't have any work. So I taught people that had been nicked, right? So if you attended a course and I was it, really sorry. I tried to make it fun. Anyway, I digress. It's interesting, that analogy about going at 60 or going at 90, you'll get there quicker, right? Well, yes, you will. We used to teach on the course that the difference between a mile at 70 versus a mile, I think it was at 80, was about 1 minute and 21 seconds, right? And I used to say, what can you really do? What difference does that make? 1 minute, 21, it's barely enough time to get in, use the loom, get a drink. So what, right? But it feels at the time epic. It feels faster, right? And what just hit me in that is, actually, you're right. In those points where I do, it's now. I've got to go with this, right? I think it's very much like that. It feels like this level of brilliance has to be done at that pace. Otherwise, the work won't be, the output won't be, the results won't be as whatever. But you know what? I've never tried. I've never tried when I get that moment going, just hold on a minute, right? Just dial it back, stick at 70 and see what happens. And what I don't have, and I'm determined I'm going to try this after this episode, is seeing that coming and forcing myself to put cruise control on at 70, go, no, it's fine, it's a minute and 21 seconds, what difference does it make? And seeing whether I don't end up getting to the office more stressed, more burnt out, more it's really fascinating, because I think the analogy is so close. But we almost, like, it's a feeling of, I have to do that. I have to drive that fast. I have to do it now, everything, all at once. And yet, where does it lead us in the end? It's fascinating, isn't it, that it's so prevalent, and yet so many of us seem to make the same choices at the same time.
But it is that not driven by that fear of forgetting. It's a lot of the diagnostics around ADHD is, speak impulsively because I say it now, or I can't not butt in, because I'll forget it if I don't say it. So that sort of going at it full pelt is about sort of keeping up with the pace of thought that comes with that hyperactivity. It's not the rush to get there a minute and 12 seconds earlier. It's a rush to get it done at all and not go off on a side road country lane and end up in a country pub.
Yeah.
So it's more complex than that. That cliche line I keep throwing out there. It is complicated, and it is tied up in our symptoms and how we choose to manage them. And I'm just wary of people thinking, oh, well, I just need to drive at 40 everywhere. There's a balance to be found, isn't there?
Well, there is. Now, you've perfectly segued it to where my head was. In finding that balance, we often talk about pills and skills, right? We often talk about this thing of acquiring the right skills to help us. So, parking medication for once and looking at skills, again, I think what's really important is to have these conversations and to learn these tools that can give us the skills for these times, right? So there are now 101 different apps for organization. There are 101 different potions, pills, supplements that claim to improve your focus to, a mind-blowing level. And, there's all this stuff out there that we're bombarded with. What it occurs to me is a lot of it's aimed at this. A lot of it's aimed at do this, take this, use this, and you'll be able to sustain that, right? You'll be able to manage that better. And I think that for me leaves a taste in the mouth I'm not quite comfortable with. But what I do agree with is that we need to develop skills and tools and frameworks that mean in that period where we are going to drive at 90 because that's the only way we feel we're going to get it done. Okay, how do we do that safely? How do we do that and manage it? How do we do that and arrive in one piece and know that that was then and it's not every time, right? That's the skill set I think there's definitely relevance in building. And I think that then can become part of the recovery kit as well. It can become part of that, right? When I've hit this point, can I fall back a bit harder on some of those skills? Can I fall back a bit harder on some of those strategies? Rely on things differently, right? And just to, put this out there, we've got a wonderful lady on our group called Sarah, and we were chatting last night about, in the tips and tricks track, what do people use? And AI came up again. And she and I are about as geeky on AI as each other, and I think you are, right? And she said, I've designed my own GPT for optimization. And that's kind of what she does. She's an operations sort of guru. That's her job. And without giving her context, I said, I'd love to try it, right? I don't know what she'd fed it. I don't know what the criteria was. I'd love to see what this does. I had a very lovely hours chat with my chat GPT, Monty. Told it exactly where I was, exactly what was going on, what the business was, everything that I had on, how I was feeling, that I was burnt out, that I was here, and kind of said, thoughts, right? That's all I said. What are your thoughts? And I'll be honest with you, I could bring that up now and look at it and go, you know what? It's actually got some really sensible stuff in there. It's imported my diary into it. So it knows my schedule. I told you what things are non-negotiable, what things are flexible, what's included in work and recovery for me and exercise. And it's given me a schedule. And more importantly, it's given me something that I think I've never seen before, which is it's given me a sort of a strategy to almost headline different parts of my day, to look at them as this is creativity, this is admin, this is recovery. But I don't do that. I mean, I think I'm a very typical ADHD and medicated or not. I bounce, I'm like one of those bouncy balls with a weight in it, so you never quite know where it's going to go everywhere. That's my day 9 times out of 10, right? Sorry, clients. This has kind of gone, no, here's a strategy, and I know exactly where it's going from. Here's structure. Here is some structure for a period of time that you stand a chance of sticking to because you've told me you want to. And giving it these headlines will help bring you back when the ball's going off in a different direction. And I also know, having spent time looking at it today, that actually looking at that, what I can also do from it is employ that when I'm not burnt out. I could use that new calendar system whenever I want. And I think it's odd that it's taken me this long to do that, this long to try that and go, that could actually help. Now, I'm not saying I will. There is the oxymoron of, great advice, will I use it? I haven't got there yet. But it certainly gave me a lot to think about. And where I'm sort of going with this is, that's a skill acquired that I just don't have. I could not have on my own looked at everything, organised it, structured it, and made it make sense. And if I tried, I'd have lost a week or more only doing that. which would have caused issues, not solved issues. So this skill acquisition is changing, right? This skill acquisition and what we fall back on or what we try is a changing conversation. And using the tools that are available to us may, when we're at the lowest ebb, be a really good start to that process of recovery, right? Because now I don't feel that's going to take forever. I've done something. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And what you're talking about there is externalizing your executive functioning to an artificial intelligence. And that makes a lot of sense, because executive functioning, it is about processing information. That's what executive functioning is. Your Monday has a lot of experience of you. Yeah, so it knows how you function. You couldn't sit down with ChatGPT and just have it do that for anyone. It's a very personalized thing. You only get out what you put into that sort of thing. But I think there is a lot of mileage in that, because the more we can do when we're whelmed to externalize, and I'm a prolific list writer, and that's how I organize stuff and categorizing stuff. I've started using AI as well to do some of those more tedious tasks, because why not? I have executive dysfunction, so why not get a machine that can do that? Because it doesn't have to come up with any brilliant new ideas. It just has to tidy them up. Tidying up is hard when you're tired. I mean, it's harder the rest of the times, but it's particularly hard when you're feeling the way we're describing feeling at the moment. And when when the kids are coming in and the place is a mess and they just drop everything everywhere, they just add to it. So you get to the what's the point anyway?
Yeah.
So externalizing some of that stress, and I think you've talked before on the podcast about writing things down at the end of the day. So it's just out of your head. Putting it where so that you could be confident that you're not going to forget it because it's written down is a really powerful tool. You don't need a fancy app. You don't need to train an AI to have a little notebook that you just put everything into that you were worried that you'll forget. You won't if it's in the book. And yes, if that book fills up with stuff, then it'll become meaningless. It has to be something that's always there. It might not be it might be an app on your phone where you write stuff down. It could be Apple Notes. It could be Evernote. It could be all sorts of different things. There is no right way of doing this. There's the right way for you. But one of the key things is to get that internal stuff that is causing so much burnout out. Take it out of there and put it down somewhere and allow that to be somewhere else. So it's not living rent-free in your head and adding to the strain day in, day out.
Yeah, and I think that's, if there's a takeaway from this conversation is that when this stuff is rattling around our head, that's when it's at its worst. The sooner we can get it out, it's not that will be recovered and we're done, but it's like the pressure release valve for me. You just feel that, okay, wait a minute, I might just see a way out of this. I might just be able to carve a path through that forest and get to the other side. And I do say this, start again, kind of recharge and start again. That is how it feels. But I think this skills thing is vital, as you say. And the biggest takeaway in what you just said there is it's personal. We can all look at generic, often repeated 8 things that we'll see all the time. Here are 8 things that will help your executive dysfunction. Maybe, but no. Go away and find 8 things that help your executive dysfunction, right? It's a different way of phrasing it. Here are suggestions that could, that's a different conversation about what the way things are presented. But it's important to know that you're looking for your solutions. And it doesn't matter whether your mate with ADHD said this app worked and it doesn't for you. You're not them. Never mind. It doesn't matter whether something works for my wife and doesn't for me. Different people. So it's this not comparing our struggle, our ADHD, our overwhelm, our burnout to anyone else. It's been able to look at it, understand what it means to us and why and how and when and where and what we think we can do to get out of that and putting things in place that are for us and us alone. And yes, sharing those with other people and getting support is a massive part of that. But it has to start with the conversation of you, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the only way we truly recover.
Yeah, and not looking for the shortcut slang words to justify that, to give that any validity. It's valid already. You don't need labels. You've used RSD as a label, and it is a good descriptor, but it doesn't describe everything that comes with RSD. Imposter syndrome, burnout, all these sort of buzzwords. The fact that they're buzzwords is undermining their usefulness almost. That's how I feel about them. And I know you've talked a lot about RSD, and I do think it's a thing, but it's a different thing for everyone. And I see a lot of people cling to those labels as, oh, it's okay because there is that label. There are those letters applied to it. And actually, yeah, but it's different for you and it's very personalized. If it wasn't, I could write a computer program and sit back and let a computer do the ADHD care. It's, it's these sorts of conversations and that very human element, because ADHD is a very human thing. There's us and there's dolphins have got these developed prefrontal cortex. The cortices, we need to look out for one another. And yes, there are things that can be done. There are strategies that can be taken, but you're right. They don't apply to just everyone. It's not the same.
That can't be. So here's where I want to sort of bring this to a close, right? As I said at the start, this was designed deliberately to be a very honest episode. Everything Andrew and I have said about where we are currently is absolutely true. I want you to know this. We talk almost daily unless we can't, and we are both kind of checked out in many ways at the moment and just trying to do what we can. And yes, we're trying to put our own strategies in place. But the reason we've collectively found the energy to talk about this in the run up to Christmas is because there are those of you who are keeping it together still. There are those of you who feel like you're keeping it together still. And if there's a time where all of this life plus ADHD and other is going to get really overwhelming, for a lot of people it's in the festive season. That doesn't matter whether you celebrate Christmas or not. When you see everyone else shutting down, winding down, being able to relax, and you feel like you can't, and you feel like life is too much, that's what this conversation is for. It's to say it's okay. It doesn't matter whether it's the 9th of December, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, or any day in between in the rest of the year. If you feel like you can't, you can't. And it's okay to say that. It's okay when you are genuinely whelmed to stop. As Andrew says, it's not something to use as an excuse. And the more we use it as a get out of life free card, the more we lessen its value when we really are struggling. But it is a real thing. It is okay to say, I can't. And whether that means you need 10 minutes, an hour, half a day, whatever it means, just to recoup, it's okay to let someone know that. But for me, oddly, given this podcast is called Talk ADHD, there is more value in you letting people know that without trying to explain it in terms of your ADHD than there is doing it the other way around. I know that's an odd way to end this. But the last thing I'd like to say this year is, could we stop talking about everything from the point of ADHD and start talking about it from the point of what does it mean to you? Because you're going to have more people understand you on a better level if you do that. And then we can start to help them understand where your ADHD or autism or dyslexia or any other neurodivergent condition comes into that. But remember, as Andrew said many episodes ago, you are a person with certain neurodivergent conditions. You are not a collection of conditions with added person. So that's what I would sort of like to summarize with. Andrew, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I would. In the lead up to Christmas, you're going to be faced with a lot of decisions. They're difficult. You're going to be faced with, what should I buy for this person, that person? What should I... They're probably not that bothered. There's so many Christmas Eves. I've almost been in tears walking around the shops finding that last person's present. I couldn't decide what to get them. That I've just completely ruined Christmas Day. Less so as I got older and wiser. Maybe just take your foot off the gas a bit, reduce those expectations a bit. And, you know, the season of goodwill can extend to you as well. It doesn't have to be something that's always given to everybody else. We're great at being altruistic, being neurodivergence, but some self-care is really important. Some time to sit around in your jammies and not is really valuable as well. And, you know, whatever you do, so long as you do something, it will be good enough. If it's not good, then the people who are saying it's not good enough are the ones with the issue, not you. You make an effort, have a go, but pace yourself, take a break, which is exactly what we've decided to do, and take a step back so that we can take on 2025 full throttle, because it is going to be a busy year for us.
It definitely is. More on that to come. So, folks, there we have it. We're ending the year burnt out. We're ending the year trying to recover, the both of us. And for all of you who have really sort of sat here going, yeah, me too, or have experienced this, we're right there with you. But take on board everything we've said, okay? You're humans. You can't and you shouldn't expect yourself to do everything. Take time where you need it, where you can. Vocalize your needs and give yourself some self-care, as Andrew said as well. We will be back in 2025. Between now and then, I'm hopefully going to try and put together a compilation of all 19 episodes of this year, of sort of a best bits. As and when that will come out, I'm not sure yet, but definitely sometime between when this episode is released and January next year. So do keep your eyes on that. However, for now, I'm sure I speak for Andrew as well as me in saying we wish you all a very, very happy festive season, a very happy new year. Thank you for all of your ongoing support, for continuing to listen, to continuing to share episodes. It is utterly mind-blowing to know that people are listening, are sharing, and we're really grateful for everyone that reaches out and lets us know that. And we'll see you, unbelievably, in 2025.
Until then, take care.